where we're fully committed to preaching the gospel and teaching Bible truth all around the world. Wouldn't that be great? Now, there are some countries in history who have been client nations for God. Can you think of any examples? England has been one, particularly after the ministry of John Wesley and Charles Wesley in the 1700s and the 1800s, and God blessed England, made it a great empire, and all over the world. America has been very much a client nation for God in the past 100 years, and America has sent so many missionaries all over the world. So it wouldn't be, and I think some other countries have been client nations as well throughout history, and I think it's a very great privilege for a country to be a client nation for God. And we need to take up this very seriously, to be a client nation for God, to represent God to the whole world as an ambassador nation for Jesus Christ. Pretty good? Wouldn't that be great? And verse number 4, okay, verse 44. And whosoever shall fall on this stone, that means shall be broken. That means if we fall on Jesus Christ in repentance, asking him to be our Saviour, our selfish life will be broken. But on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. It reminds us of Daniel 2, the coming of Jesus Christ as a stone cut out with our hands, smiting the kingdoms of the earth and wind and blowing them away in judgment. And when the chief priests and Pharisees had heard his parables, they perceived that he spake of them. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitude because they took him for a prophet. Very true. So they wanted to kill him because they didn't like what he was teaching. So here we have the wicked vine growers, the servants of the Old Testament prophets who were beaten, stoned and killed by Israel when they were sent to collect the harvest of spiritual fruit. The landowner then sent his son Jesus to collect the harvest, but the tenants Israel killed him. This tells of Israel rejecting Christ's kingdom, crucifying Christ, and the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Okay? Let's have a look at the third parable now. This is known as the wedding feast in Matthew 22, verses 1 to 14. We're going to have a look at this. It's amazing that Jesus told 8 parables in only about 2 days, plus other preaching as well. Pretty interesting, eh? Let's go to Matthew 22, and we're going to read verses 1 down to 14. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again by parables, and said, The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son. Okay? Who do you think is the son? Jesus. Marriage for the son? Jesus. Okay, who is the bride? Church. And the marriage is what? In heaven after the rapture, we have the marriage of the Lamb in heaven, and the king would be God the Father, I suppose you could say. And verse 3, And sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. Who were the servants who went out to invite people to the wedding? The pastors. The prophets. And they invited the Jews to come. They wouldn't come. Again, he sent forth other servants, saying, Tell them which are bidden, Behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come unto the marriage. So who were the other servants, do you think, who invited them, saying all things are now ready? All things are ready. Who do you think the other servants were? Well, John the Baptist, the 12 disciples, the 70 that were sent out, okay, and other early Christians. But verse 5, but they made light of it. They thought it was a joke. They said, we don't believe in Jesus coming. How can that possibly be? They made light of it. They were really stupid people. They didn't have the brains to read the prophets' writings and see and that Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament. Just like so many Muslims today who don't bother checking the prophecies, and the atheists. They made light of it and went their ways. I mean, they went and did their own thing. They were pleasing them, living for themselves, pleasing themselves. Couldn't care less about God. Like a lot of people say, one to his farm, another to his merchandise. They were there to make money. Verse 6, And the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them. But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, that means very angry, and he sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. What is this talking about? He sent forth his armies. Who were the armies of God? Who were the armies? The Romans. The Romans. The Roman armies. And destroyed these murderers. When did the Roman armies destroy these murderers who killed Jesus? In 70 AD. And burn up their city. Did Jerusalem get burned up in 70 AD? Yes, indeed. Absolutely. 100%. Then said he to his servants, the wedding is ready. But they which were bidden, that's the Jewish nation, were not worthy. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as you shall find, bid to the marriage. What's this talking about? Go into the highways, and as many as you find, bid or invite to the marriage. What's this talking about?
Soul winning.
Talking about gospel preaching in the church age. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all, as many as they found, both bad and good. And the wedding was furnished with guests. So it's talking about in Christ's kingdom, the wedding will be furnished with guests, people from all nations, people from all nations will be saved and in the kingdom. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw there a man which had not a wedding garment. That's talking about someone at the start of the millennium who was not saved, who never had Christ's righteousness. Okay? The wedding garment is a picture of the righteousness of Christ. And he said unto him, Friend, how camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then said the king to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Can you imagine that scene where they grab this guy, binding him hand and foot, and take him out and chuck him out of the kingdom? This is talking about people in the millennium, at the start of the millennium, who will be kicked out of the kingdom because they are Christ haters, rejectors of Christ, and don't want Christ to rule over them. Right, so here we have the wedding feast. The guests, Israel, were offered the kingdom but rejected it, being busy with their own personal activities and personal pursuits. This angered the king greatly, who sent forth his armies, that's Rome in 70 AD, destroyed these murderers and burned up their city. He sent other servants to the highways to invite as many as you shall find to the marriage. This is gospel preaching in the church age. So we are inviting people to a wedding feast, aren't we? This is going to be the marriage supper of the Lamb in heaven. And it says that we will eat food in heaven. Pretty good? Very nice. There'll be no junk food there. It'll all be healthy food. So I'm sure that it'll be a very, very nice meal.
Lots of grapes.
It'll cost us nothing, okay? It's all paid for. And so everybody, we can invite everybody to this wedding. It's a free invitation, no cost, and it's everyone's free will choice. Okay? And so we're not just inviting people to be saved from their sins. We're inviting people to a wedding feast in heaven. We're inviting them to rule with Christ in the millennium. That's what we're doing. Pretty good? Yeah. You like that idea? Good. And this life is only a little tiny speck of time where we are given a few things to be involved with, but in the millennium there'll be many things that we can be involved with. So a totally different world than you've ever imagined. Can you imagine? One thing that excites me is, as you look back 1,000 years ago, the technology 1,000 years ago was junk, was rubbish compared to today. But you go another 100 years into the future and just think about the great technological gains that will be on an earth where there's no corruption, perfect government, no false religions, freedom, peace and prosperity. Can you imagine how fast the acceleration of blessing and technology will be? Okay? Very, very exciting. Amen? And that's what Jesus is preparing for you. I go to prepare a place for you. The fourth parable is the parable of the budding fig tree. Let's go to Matthew 24, 32 and 33. Okay, Matthew 24, verse 32 and 33. Here we read on the screen, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh," or near. "So likewise ye, when you shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation is not past till all these things be fulfilled." Okay, so we ask the question here, what is meant by the fig tree? What is meant by the fig tree? Learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know the summer is near. Okay, remember how Jesus in the early part of his, John the Baptist in the early part of his ministry said the tree, axe is laid at the root of the trees. Okay? Axe is laid at the root of the trees. And he's talking about the judgment of 70 AD that would come and destroy the Jewish nation. Israel was likened to a fig tree that was to be chopped down at the roots. And the Jewish nation was cut down at the roots. And they've been a dead tree for about 1900 years. And until the Jewish nation was restored, Israelites returned from every nation into the land of Israel in 1948, and Israel became a nation in the 20th century. And this is the budding of the fig tree. The fig tree is budding, meaning after 1900 years of dead lifelessness, the Jews are coming back to the land, and the fig tree is Israel. Joel chapter 1 verse 6.